We all know how great Micheal Jordan is, but it seems like his impact is so vast that people forget about the Bulls teams before he arrived that were pretty competitive. The most skilled scorer that Chicago had before Micheal was Butterbean Bob Love, who earned his nickname simply because he loved butterbeans. But his journey as an NBA star wasn't as clear-cut as you might think. One of his biggest setbacks was that he had a severe stuttering issue, which affected him even after his playing days. After dominating at Southern University, he still had to fight and claw his way for a spot in the league, mainly being used as a defensive player off the bench in his first 3 seasons. Once he finally got an opportunity with the up-and-coming Chicago Bulls, he got a chance to show his offensive abilities, and his career finally took off. Bob was an ambidextrous player, and he had shooting range out to 20 feet, as a hand in his face really didn't affect him. He had a decent handle for his position, but he could also move without the ball to get open. He was a volume scorer, so his efficiency wasn't always the best, and with a career average of less than 2 assists, he was shooting it every time he got the ball. But the Bulls had a complete team around him, so he had the freedom to focus on scoring. Bob was one of the most underrated players in NBA history, as the 70s Bulls seemed to never get talked about. But the late, great Butterbean deserves his shine, especially considering all the obstacles he overcame in his life. Welcome to Piece of Hoops, and let's get down to it. Bob was born on December 8, 1942 in Bastrop, Louisiana to a sharecropping family. He first started practicing the game by shooting a pair of socks through a wire hanger. Bob had a severe stuttering habit and he rarely spoke because of it. He ran away from his abusive household at 8 years old to live with his grandmother, as he would become an introvert, focusing his attention on sports. Once he got to Morehouse High, he was a star basketball player and a starting quarterback, leading his teams to state titles in both sports. Future Sixers big man Luke Jackson was his favorite receiver. Bob earned a football scholarship to Southern University, but he wound up playing basketball. Over his 4-year career, he was a 3-time NAIA All-American and a 3-time All-Conference member, averaging 25 points and 15 rebounds. Bob was drafted in the 4th round of the 1965 draft by the Royals, but he didn't make the team, so they sent him to play for the Trenton Colonials of the Eastern Professional Basketball League. Bob averaged 24 points, 19 rebounds, and 2 assists, leading Trenton to a 20-8 record, as they lost to the Wilmington Blue Bombers in the division finals. Bob was 2nd team All-League and the Rookie of the Year. This great season gave him enough confidence to try out for the Royals again, and he made the team this time. Cincinnati was basically just Oscar Robertson and Jerry Lucas at this point, but they did have some solid pieces in Adrian Smith, Flynn Robinson, Happy Harrison, and Connie Dearkin. Bob would be in a reserve role to start his career, but he showed some potential in the beginning, dropping 18 points and 6 rebounds against Philly, then putting up 26 points and 8 rebounds a month later. He dropped 2 more 20-point games this year, and while he wasn't getting a lot of opportunities now, his per 36 numbers showed he could be something in this league. The 2 stars in Cincinnati were able to drag this team to a 39-42 record, just enough to make the playoffs. Bob averaged 7 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist, but he was left off the playoff roster as the Royals lost in 4 games to Philly. But during the offseason, it was discovered that Bob had worn out 2 discs in his back, and this injury would force him to change his game. He really showed off his new and improved style in his 2nd season, dropping a then career-high 29 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 assists in the 5th game of the year. But even after this great performance, Coach Jack McMahon mainly used him as a defensive stopper, almost like he didn't really believe in Bob's offensive ability. He would have a few games with double figures for a 26-point, 12-rebound, and 3 assists showing on March 19th against Philly. The Big O led the league in points, assists, and free-throw percentage, but the Royals were stuck in neutral, finishing 39-43, this time missing the playoffs. Bob averaged 6 points, 3 rebounds, and an assist. Bob wasn't protected in the 1968 expansion draft, so he was picked up by the new Milwaukee Bucks. Bob looked at this as a fresh start, another chance to show what he could do. He was playing great in the preseason, leading the team in scoring and placing 2nd in rebounding. But when the regular season came, Bob was stuck on the bench. He was only playing about 5 minutes a game, which he assumed was due to him being late to sign his contract over a few $1,000s. But Bob would be free of the Bucks, as he was thrown in with Bob Weiss in a trade to Chicago for Flynn Robinson. The Bulls were in their 3rd year of existence, but they had a promising squad with Jerry Sloan, Bob Boozer, Clem Haskins, Jim Washington, and Tom Boerwinkle. Coach Dick Motto only knew of Bob as a defensive player, so that's what his role was. He helped supplement a Bulls defense that allowed the 3rd fewest points. However, their offense was dysfunctional, as they were 2nd last in field goal percentage, last in free throw attempts, and last in assists, finishing 33-49, missing the playoffs. Bob averaged 5 points and 2.5 rebounds this season. In his 4th year, Bob finally got an opportunity to play big minutes, as Dick Motta always catered his offense to the forwards, and he would put the league on notice. Chicago added some championship pedigree, trading for Chet Walker from the Sixers. Bob was on a mission, averaging 25 points and 9 rebounds on 52% shooting in November. His play style was very unusual for the time, as although Bob was listed as a power forward, he was a lanky 215 pounds, lacking the strength to compete down low with the bigger fours. His offensive game centered around slashing or his outside shot, but Bob was a streaky shooter, so he would have his cold nights from time to time. On March 15th, he came out of nowhere dropping 47 points and 12 rebounds on the Bucks, which probably felt really good for Bob after a long shooting slump. He grabbed 32 double-doubles, ranked 19th in scoring and 5th in free throw percentage, even earning a top 20 finish in MVP voting. Clem, Chet, and Bob combined for over 60 points a game, finally giving Chicago the offensive push they needed, as their 39-43 record was enough to make the playoffs. In his breakout season, Bob averaged 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists on a career-high 47% shooting. They faced the Hawks in the semifinals, as Bob dropped 15 points and 7 rebounds in his playoff debut, but the Bulls were blown out. He had double-doubles over the next 2 games, but Atlanta was the more experienced team, easily beating the Bulls in 5 games. Bob had a rough series, shooting just 39%, but his improvement in the regular season not only saved his career, but it established him as one of the best up-and-coming players in the league. He was the clear-cut #1 option in 1970, and he had the green light, averaging 25 points and 9 rebounds in the first 20 games, including a season-high 44 points and 13 rebounds on March 5th against the Warriors. He was 6th in scoring, 9th in free throw percentage, but he was also in the top 20 for defensive win shares. He wasn't just an all-star for the first time, he made the All-NBA second team. The Bulls' defensive identity really shined this year, as they allowed the second fewest points in the league. Their 51-31 record was their best in franchise history up to that point, as Bob averaged 25 points, 9 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. The Bulls faced the Lakers in the semifinals, and Bob really picked up his play in the postseason, dropping 24, 34, 27, and 36 in the first 4 games, as the series was tied. But after shooting 57% in those games, he had a cold streak, shooting 39% in the next 3 games, as Chicago lost in Game 7. Even after a record-breaking 1970 season, the media still didn't believe in the Bulls, referring to them as the team without a superstar, something that bothered Bob greatly. But due to his stutter, he never really spoke to the media, or on the court for that matter, as new acquisition Norm Van Lier became his mouthpiece on the court. The Bulls added some solid bigs in the draft as well, selecting Howard Porter and Clifford Ray. Bob started out on fire, dropping 3 straight 30-point games to begin the season. December was the best month of his career, averaging 29 points, including 2 40-point games. He was more focused on scoring this year, so he only had 7 double-doubles, but he was the engine that powered their offense. He was still great on the other end as well, and so were his teammates, as the Bulls had 5 players in the top 20 for defensive rating. Bob made another All-NBA second team, and he would join Norm on the all-defensive second team for the first time, as Chicago allowed the fewest points in the league again. They had an even better regular season than the year before, finishing 57-25, as Bob averaged a career-high 26 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. The Bulls faced the Lakers again in the semifinals, but Bob couldn't find his shot, shooting over 35% just once, as the Bulls were easily swept. The Bulls signed Dennis Autry and Gar Hurd to bolster their front court in 1972. Bob started this season in a funk, shooting under 40% in the first 20 games. Even though his overall efficiency was down, he had a 3-game span in February averaging 47 points and 10 rebounds on 56% shooting, including back-to-back 49-point outings. But Bob's shooting slump was spread to the entire team, as Chicago's offense regressed from 6th last year to 14th out of 17 teams this year. Their defense still held up, so they finished 51-31. Bob averaged 23 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists, as Chicago faced the Lakers in the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row. Bob was really hooping, dropping 32 points and 7 rebounds in Game 2, and 38 points, 13 rebounds, and 6 assists in Game 4, as the series was tied again. He put up 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 3 assists on 10 of 14 shooting in Game 5, but the Bulls still lost by 20. Bob shot 1 for 12 in Game 6, but Norm and Jerry picked up the slack, forcing a Game 7 on the road. But he and Chet both struggled in this one, combining to shoot 11 for 36 in a close 3-point loss for Chicago. The Bulls had suffered 3 straight early playoff exits at this point, so this season was a make or break for them, as now with defensive stats being counted, the full impact of Bob's game could be measured. He dropped 34 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 steals on January 25th against Seattle, then dropped 34 points again, along with 7 rebounds and 5 steals a month later. He dropped a season-high 43 points with 10 rebounds and 5 assists on March 6th against Houston. He was top 20 in points and defensive win shares, while Norm Van Lier had a career year, making the All-NBA second team. The Bulls continued their normal trend with a subpar offense and a stout defense, so they won 51 games again. Bob averaged 22 points, 6 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and a steal. The Bulls finally didn't have to face the Lakers in the playoffs, but the Pistons weren't a walk in the park. Bob had 38 in Game 2 and 32 in Game 5, but he went through another slump, making just 14 of his 47 attempts in the next 2 games. But the Bulls snuck by Detroit by 2 in Game 7, winning their first playoff series in franchise history. They faced the Bucks in the conference finals as Bob continued to struggle, shooting just 36% for the series. The Bulls didn't have an answer for Kareem at all, as he averaged 35 points and 20 rebounds on 66% shooting in a sweep for Milwaukee. After being embarrassed by essentially one man in the conference finals, the Bulls traded for Nate Thurmond to become their new starting center. Unfortunately, Bob's back issues would return, so he wouldn't start the season until November 30th. After another slow start, he finally picked it up, averaging 25 points in January. Because Chicago ran the slowest pace, they scored and allowed the fewest points. Their 47-35 record was still enough for a playoff berth, as Bob averaged 22 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. The Bulls faced the Kings in the semifinals, as Bob had 4 30-point performances in a 6-game series win. The conference finals brought the Golden State Warriors. Bob averaged 25 and 7 through the first 4 games. And even after a 7 for 21 shooting night in Game 5, the Bulls got a crucial win on the road to pull within 1 win of the NBA Finals. They had the perfect chance to close it out at home in Game 6, but they shot 39% as a team, only getting 2 points from their reserves, and they lost by double digits. Now they had to travel all the way to California for Game 7. This was a defensive battle, as both teams shot below 39%, but a 6 for 26 showing from Bob really doomed the Bulls, and they lost by 4. Seeing their best chance of a championship slip away. The Bulls went from competing for a title to a full-on rebuild in 1975, as Chet retired and Jerry got injured. Bob continued to deal with his back problems as his shot continued to suffer. He still put up his points, but it took a lot of shots to do so. He scored a season-high 40 points on January 6th against New Orleans. Second-year forward Mickey Johnson had a solid season, while former Bullet Jack Marin was a good contributor off the bench. The Bulls had a collection of good players, but their roster just wasn't talented enough to compete, and it didn't help that Bob wasn't at 100% either, so their 24-58 record was their worst in franchise history up to that point. Bob averaged 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists. With the Bulls clearly needing to start over in 1976, Bob was traded on November 30th after 7.5 seasons with the team, going to the New York Nets for a second-round pick. Reports later came out that Bob and Coach Mata didn't get along too well, and Chet also had problems with him, as they both said he tried to be too controlling. But that didn't matter now, as Bob was on another team, but he was waived on January 20th, signing with Seattle a week later. But the former All-NBA talent was reduced to the 4th-string small forward, as he had a few double-digit games, but nothing spectacular. The Sonics finished 40-42, missing the playoffs, while Bob averaged 7 points and 3.5 rebounds. The 2 discs in his back that slipped after his rookie year were completely worn out by now, and Bob was tired of the excessive cortisone shots and the never-ending therapy sessions, so he decided to retire after 11 seasons. However, he still had a stuttering issue, so he couldn't find any reliable work after his NBA career. He found a job at Nordstrom, making just $4.45 an hour washing dishes. But John Nordstrom was so impressed with his work ethic that he offered to pay for speech therapy classes. After hundreds of hours of therapy, Bob could finally communicate the way he wanted to, and he was promoted, becoming the company's corporate spokesperson. Jerry Krause saw the story in the media and decided to hire him in 1993 to be the director of community relations for the Bulls. The man who struggled to speak in public now had a job where he frequently talked to the youth. Bob continued to be involved with the Bulls organization until his passing in 2024 from cancer. He was 81 years old. Bob Love was arguably the best Chicago Bull before Micheal Jordan. His playstyle was far from the norm at the time, as he wasn't the usual 1970s power forward. He loved to operate in the mid-range area, as he would post up a small forward or take a bigger defender off the dribble to the rim. He was also one of the best defenders in the league as well, so Bob was a complete player in his prime. However, a back injury suffered after his rookie season forced him to change his game entirely. It was also his undoing, as it forced his retirement. Even though he possibly had a Hall of Fame career, his post-career story was even better. He still dealt with his stutter and he was limited in employment, but his determination gave him a chance to finally get some real help for his speech, as he was finally able to overcome it and even become a motivational speaker, something he never thought he could do earlier on in his life. Thank you guys. I really appreciate y'all. It seems like nobody talks about what the Bulls were before Micheal Jordan. And Bob Love was one of the main guys on this team. Like the way he played the game, he plays like a smaller Danny Manning. He could play inside, but he preferred to be on the perimeter shooting, who can create off the dribble, who can still play some good defense. That team was great. One of the few examples of a team where you didn't need one superstar guy. So like they always had a great defensive identity, but just they needed that guy that was going to score the ball. And Bob was the scorer. Like he was a great player. Like he's very underrated because again, like nobody talks about the Bulls before Micheal Jordan got there. Shout out to Bob Love, RIP to Bob, man. RIP to the Butterbean, man. He was a very underrated guy. A great two-way player, to be honest. Thank you. Please be safe, stay on the ground. Have a great day. I'm out. Peace.